Imagine waking up tomorrow morning just like any other day. You walk into the kitchen, brew yourself a warm cup of coffee, then grab a banana for a quick breakfast before starting your day. Nothing feels unusual. In fact, millions of people around the world do exactly the same thing every single day. But in recent years, the internet has become flooded with a warning that sounds alarming. Never mix bananas with coffee. Some people claim the combination disrupts digestion. Others insist your body can't properly absorb the nutrients. Some even argue that this simple habit is quietly damaging your health. But here's the question. If any of that were true, why do millions of people continue doing it every day without noticing anything wrong? And even more surprisingly, why do some professional athletes deliberately consume bananas and coffee before competitions? Maybe the problem isn't the banana. Maybe it isn't the coffee either. Perhaps we've misunderstood how the human body actually works. And if that's true, then it isn't just the banana and coffee combination that's been misunderstood. It could also mean many of the dietary rules circulating across the internet are based on misconceptions. To find the answer, we need to do something that's surprisingly rare whenever a piece of information goes viral. We need to stop trusting sensational headlines and start following the evidence, because science rarely offers simple answers, and that's exactly what makes it fascinating. Before we step into research laboratories, scientific journals, and the complexities of the human digestive system, let's begin somewhere much simpler, the breakfast table. Picture two items sitting side by side. On the left is a freshly brewed cup of black coffee. Its rich aroma fills the room. Thin wisps of steam still rise from the surface, and within minutes, millions of caffeine molecules will begin making their way through your body. On the right sits a ripe banana. It's not as exotic as some tropical fruits, nor as expensive as the latest health supplement making bold promises, yet it remains one of the most widely consumed fruits on Earth. At first glance, the two seem completely unrelated. One is a beverage, the other is a fruit. One is famous for keeping people awake, while the other is often praised as a natural source of energy. But the moment the internet placed them together in the same sentence, the story suddenly became far more dramatic than reality. Never mix banana with coffee. That phrase appears everywhere, on social media, health blogs, and short-form videos lasting less than a minute. Interestingly, almost all of these posts follow the same pattern. They jump straight to the conclusion, but rarely explain the process behind it. They never describe what's actually happening inside the body. They rarely discuss scientific research in its full context, and all too often, one person's personal experience is presented as if it applies to everyone. That's where the problem begins. The human brain naturally prefers simple rules. A statement like, "never eat this with that," is much easier to remember than a lengthy scientific explanation. The problem is, the human body isn't a simple machine that reacts the same way in every person. Two individuals can eat exactly the same foods in exactly the same amounts, yet experience completely different responses. Genetics, gut health, sleep quality, stress levels, and even how regularly someone drinks coffee all influence the outcome. And as it turns out, that's the part almost nobody talks about. Your body doesn't actually recognize food as banana or coffee. The moment food enters your mouth, your digestive system begins breaking everything down into tiny molecules. Carbohydrates become glucose. Proteins are broken into amino acids. Fats become fatty acids. Vitamins and minerals are absorbed through their own specialized pathways. To your body, food is ultimately nothing more than a collection of molecules waiting to be processed, not the familiar names we use every day. Which leads to a far more interesting question. If your body doesn't even recognize bananas and coffee as two distinct objects, why has this combination earned such a dangerous reputation? Is there really a unique biological reaction that occurs only when the two are consumed together? Or have we been overlooking something else all along? To answer those questions, we have to follow their journey into a place none of us has ever seen with our own eyes, the inside of the human body. And that's where this story becomes far more fascinating than a simple myth about two foods you're supposedly never meant to eat together. If we follow the story that's been circulating across the internet, the journey should already be over. The banana meets the coffee, something bad happens, and that's the end of it. Simple. But science almost never works as simply as the internet does. So let's follow their journey, not from the breakfast table, but from inside your body. Just seconds after your first bite of banana enters your mouth, enzymes in your saliva begin breaking down some of its carbohydrates into smaller molecules. Shortly afterward, the banana travels down into your stomach. Almost at the same time, the warm coffee you just drank flows into the very same place. And this is the moment many people describe as the dangerous encounter. But does anything truly extraordinary happen here? The answer is surprisingly simple. Inside your stomach, there is no dramatic reaction between bananas and coffee, no chemical explosion, no toxins suddenly forming, no mysterious process that causes your body to panic simply because these two foods meet. What actually happens is far less dramatic. Your stomach acid simply continues doing its job. It doesn't care whether you've just eaten a banana, bread, rice, or potatoes. Its only purpose is to begin breaking food down into much simpler forms before passing it on to the small intestine. Which raises another question. If there isn't any dangerous reaction in the stomach, why do so many people report feeling uncomfortable after consuming bananas and coffee together? This is exactly where most internet videos begin taking shortcuts. They immediately blame the combination itself, but the real explanation may be much more complex. Imagine two people drinking the exact same cup of coffee. The first person feels refreshed, focused, and energized. The second experiences a racing heartbeat, slightly shaky hands, and even feelings of anxiety. Yet they drank the same coffee, so what's the difference? The answer lies within their own bodies. Over the years, scientists have discovered that people don't metabolize caffeine at the same rate. Some individuals carry genetic variations that allow them to break down caffeine very quickly. Others process it much more slowly. As a result, a cup of coffee that feels perfectly normal for one person may produce much stronger effects in someone else. And interestingly, the same principle applies to digestion. If someone's stomach is naturally sensitive to coffee, almost any food eaten alongside it often ends up taking the blame, when in reality, the banana isn't the problem at all. The coffee is simply revealing a sensitivity that already existed. But there's another fact that's even more interesting. Many people believe coffee gives you energy. Technically, it doesn't. Coffee contains virtually no calories. Your body isn't receiving fuel from coffee. What caffeine actually does is far more clever than that. It tricks your brain. Throughout the day, your brain produces a chemical called adenosine. As adenosine builds up, you gradually feel more tired. Caffeine works by occupying adenosine receptors, preventing those fatigue signals from reaching your brain. The energy you feel isn't mu energy, it's simply fatigue that's been temporarily masked. Now look at the banana again. Unlike coffee, bananas actually provide energy. Their natural carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, which is then transported throughout your body to fuel your cells. In other words, while coffee helps you feel more alert, bananas supply the energy your body genuinely needs. At first glance, the two seem to complement each other remarkably well. So why is this combination still considered problematic? Perhaps the problem isn't the coffee, and perhaps it isn't the banana either. Instead, it may be something that's almost always added to modern coffee. Think about it for a moment. How many people actually drink plain black coffee without adding anything? Most people choose lattes, mochas, frappes, caramel syrup, sugar, whipped cream, or generous amounts of flavored creamer. A single drink can easily contain as much sugar as several tablespoons of table sugar. When a beverage like that is paired with a banana, which already contains natural sugars, the body receives a much larger sugar load than it would from drinking black coffee alone. And that's when many people begin noticing something different. They feel extremely energized for an hour or two, then suddenly, they become sleepy, hungry, unable to concentrate. Eventually, they arrive at what seems like an obvious conclusion. Bananas and coffee just don't go well together. When in reality, what doesn't work well is the amount of sugar they consumed. But wait, if added sugar is the real issue, why do some sports nutrition experts actually recommend consuming a banana and coffee together before competition? Doesn't that completely contradict everything we've heard so far? The answer takes us to a scientific study whose findings may completely change the way you think about this simple combination of two everyday foods. At this point, the story begins to change. At the beginning of this video, we were led to believe that bananas and coffee were a combination to avoid. Then we discovered that the body doesn't actually undergo any dangerous chemical reaction when the two meet inside the stomach. In fact, most of the discomfort people experience is far more likely to be related to caffeine sensitivity or the added sugar in coffee drinks, not the banana itself. But one important question still remains unanswered. Why do some sports nutrition experts actually recommend this combination? If the internet says never mix them, why do the very people whose job is to understand human performance often do the exact opposite? The answer takes us into a world that's rarely discussed on social media, the world of sports nutrition. Imagine a marathon runner standing at the starting line. In just a few minutes, their body will be pushed through dozens of kilometers without stopping. Every gram of available energy matters. Coaches aren't only thinking about physical training, they're also carefully considering what their athletes eat before the race begins. Interestingly, this is where bananas often enter the picture. Not because bananas possess some magical power, but because they provide something remarkably simple and incredibly important: easily digestible carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the body's primary fuel source during moderate to high-intensity exercise. After digestion, they're converted into glucose. Some of that glucose is used immediately for energy, while the rest is stored in the liver and muscles as glycogen. That glycogen becomes your body's fuel reserve whenever you're running, cycling, or performing strenuous physical activity. Now, let's look at coffee. Unlike bananas, coffee contributes virtually no energy in the form of calories, but the caffeine it contains can increase alertness, reduce the perception of fatigue, and, for some people, improve focus during physical activity. That's why caffeine has become one of the most extensively researched performance-enhancing compounds in sports science. When the two are combined, something interesting happens. The banana provides the fuel. The coffee helps your body perform more effectively. At first glance, they seem to complement each other rather well. But don't jump to conclusions just yet, because this is where many people get it wrong. People hear that athletes consume bananas and coffee together and immediately assume the combination must be beneficial for everyone. But it's not that simple. Athletes live under conditions that are vastly different from those of most people. They follow carefully planned diets, strict training schedules, high energy demands, and have often experimented with different nutritional strategies to discover what works best for their own bodies. That means what improves performance for an elite athlete may not produce the same results for someone who spends most of the day sitting in front of a computer. This is where the internet oversimplifies the story once again. One group insists the combination is dangerous. Another claims it's the secret to better health. Science chooses neither side. Science simply says, it depends. It depends on who's consuming it. It depends on how much coffee they're drinking. It depends on their health condition. And it depends on why they're consuming it in the first place. That's the nuance that's often missing from 30-second social media videos. The human body doesn't operate in black and white rules. There's another fact that's even more fascinating. When researchers studied dietary patterns across different countries, they found something that didn't fit the narrative commonly shared online. In many parts of the world, coffee and fruit have been consumed as part of everyday diets for decades. There has been no measurable increase in disease that can be explained simply because these foods were eaten within the same meal or around the same time. That doesn't mean bananas and coffee are the perfect combination for everyone, but it does suggest that the claim "never mix them" is far stronger than the scientific evidence supporting it. Which brings us to the most important question of all. If there's no strong evidence showing that bananas and coffee are harmful for most healthy people, why did this myth spread so quickly? Surprisingly, the answer has very little to do with nutrition. It has everything to do with how the human brain works. We're naturally far more likely to remember information that's surprising than information that's ordinary. A headline like, "10 foods you should never eat together," grab far more attention than "food combinations depend on individual circumstances." Social media algorithms amplify this effect even further. Content that triggers fear, curiosity, or outrage is more likely to be promoted, allowing dramatic claims to spread much faster, even when they're not the most accurate. Without realizing it, millions of people begin repeating the same message, from one video to another, from one article to the next, until eventually an opinion starts sounding like an established fact. But there's still one final piece we haven't discussed. Not whether bananas and coffee can be consumed together, but rather, who actually shouldn't consume this combination. Because while most healthy people are unlikely to experience any problems, there are a few specific situations where a cup of coffee and a banana may not be the best choice. And that may be the most important part of this entire story to understand before deciding whether this combination is right for your own body.
At this point, we've carefully unpacked one claim after another that's been circulating online. We've learned that the body doesn't produce any dangerous reactions simply because bananas and coffee happen to be in the stomach at the same time. We've also seen that most scientific research does not support the claim that this combination is harmful for healthy individuals. But there's one major mistake people keep making. They always ask, can you mix bananas with coffee? When the far better question is, who's drinking it? Imagine two people walking into the same coffee shop. The first is a runner who has just finished a 10-kilometer morning workout. His muscle glycogen stores are running low, his body needs carbohydrates, and he's already accustomed to consuming caffeine before training. The second person has just woken up after only 4 hours of sleep. They're stressed from work, haven't eaten anything since the previous evening, and have a history of recurring acid reflux. They order exactly the same thing: a cup of coffee, a banana. Will the outcome be the same? Almost certainly not. And that's precisely why modern nutrition science is becoming increasingly reluctant to give absolute answers. The human body isn't a photocopy. It's an incredibly complex biological system. Now let's look at the first group of people who should be more cautious, those with sensitive stomachs. Coffee is known to stimulate stomach acid production in some individuals. If your stomach is particularly sensitive to caffeine, drinking coffee on an empty stomach may trigger discomfort, nausea, or a burning sensation in your chest. In situations like this, the banana isn't the problem. In fact, for some people, eating the banana first may actually reduce discomfort by ensuring there's food in the stomach before the coffee arrives. However, if you still experience symptoms after eating a banana and drinking coffee, the most likely cause is your body's response to caffeine, not the combination itself. Then there's the second group, people who are highly sensitive to caffeine. You probably know someone who can drink coffee at 9 o'clock at night and fall asleep peacefully an hour later. Meanwhile, someone else drinks only half a cup in the morning and experiences a racing heartbeat that lasts until lunchtime. The difference isn't the quality of the coffee. It's how each person's body metabolizes caffeine. So when someone says, "Bananas and coffee don't agree with me," that doesn't necessarily mean the banana is the issue. It may simply mean their body doesn't tolerate that amount of caffeine very well. But there's another group that's rarely discussed: people who buy modern coffee beverages. Take a look at the menu in most coffee shops. Caramel latte, mocha, frappuccino, vanilla cream, hazelnut latte. At first glance, they all seem like coffee, but in reality, a large portion of their calories comes from sugar, flavored syrups, sweetened milk, and cream. Now add one large banana. Within minutes, your body receives carbohydrates from the banana, along with a significant amount of added sugar from the drink. As blood sugar rises rapidly, your body releases insulin to move that glucose into your cells. Not long afterward, some people begin feeling sleepy, low on energy, hungry again. And without realizing it, they blame the banana. Yet if the coffee had simply been black coffee without excessive added sugar, the experience might have been completely different. That's why context is always more important than a simple list of foods you supposedly should or shouldn't combine. What about people who are trying to lose weight? That's interesting too. Many people avoid bananas because they believe they're high in sugar. But a medium-sized banana typically contains only around 100 calories, along with fiber that helps you stay full longer. Compare that to a trendy coffee drink, which can easily contain 3 to 5 times as many calories. Ironically, the food that often gets blamed isn't usually the real culprit. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson from this entire video. We're constantly searching for one single food to blame, when in reality, health is almost never determined by one food alone. What's far more important is your overall eating pattern over months, or even years. One banana won't make you healthy. One cup of coffee won't make you sick. But the habits you repeat every single day, those are what ultimately shape your health. So, can you enjoy a cup of coffee with a banana? If you're generally healthy, don't have a medical condition that requires dietary restrictions, and your body feels perfectly fine after consuming them together, the current scientific evidence provides no strong reason to avoid that combination. However, if your body tells a different story, whether that's stomach pain, heart palpitations, or trouble sleeping after drinking coffee, don't ignore those signals. Listen to your body and adjust your habits accordingly. Science gives us the broader picture, but your own consistent experience also matters,
as long as it's interpreted thoughtfully and rationally. And perhaps
That's the answer we've been searching for all along. Not that bananas and coffee are a dangerous pair, but that every human body tells a different story. The next time you come across a headline claiming, "Never eat this food with that food," pause for a moment. Ask yourself one simple question. Is this actually supported by evidence, or does it simply sound sensational enough to earn clicks? Because more often than not, the simplest answer isn't necessarily the correct one. If today's video gave you a fresh perspective on how the human body works and why so many food myths continue to survive for years, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more evidence-based health explanations.